Well, thank you everybody for coming and for making it here in the middle of the day.
Braving LA traffic.
Braving LA traffic. Welcome to our furniture workshop. This workshop today is an extension of an online course we developed that focuses on furniture. And one of the big themes of this course is using furniture as a design element rather than just filling up a room with stuff. And the other really important part about the course is this idea that, a lot of times these online courses, like, they inspire you, which is great. I really want to do that. And that's why we're here. But the other part of it is giving you the tools to actually get there step by step. So in some ways, it's creative and inspirational. And in other ways, it's very practice-oriented. Natasha, this is not going to be a lecture because for that, you can watch the course. But this is more of a dialogue, I think. And Natasha is my friend, and she's a fellow architect and brilliant mind and professor. And some of her students are here. And I really like Natasha's approach because Natasha is this brilliant, very mathematical mind.
Let's go through this.
But she's also very kind of humble about it. I was telling Izzy earlier, like, if I started really to list this woman's accomplishments, we'd just be sitting here for the whole hour. But Natasha, I think, she has this mathematical mind, but like, she's so design, obviously. So Natasha, let's start with that. How do you use furniture to design? How do you bridge this?
So I'm going to put the professor head. It is amazing what furniture does for us because we do not understand the use size of the space unless there's furniture in it. So in environmental psychology, there's zillion theories, but one of them will call it affordances, meaning when you see this particular chair, you know that you can sit on it. And that chair is an affordance, meaning it affords you to sit.
Yeah.
And then when you have kind of rituals where you're familiar with chairs that we basically sit on them, then you can think about it as action schemas. So when you see 3 chairs, you know the expectation is that there will be 3 people sitting there. So some of the functions of furniture are completely inseparable for space. When we see empty space, it is incredibly hard for us to gauge.
Right. It's too abstract.
It's absolutely abstract.
Yeah.
So furniture defines a placiness, if that is a word, because
I like it. Placiness.
Well, so there's
a
whole lot of talk.
A sense of place, but placiness is better, I think.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot of talk about placeness, which I am absolutely 100% sure it is a word. But there is also the idea of place versus space, which is really a big deal.
It gives it an identity. It creates an identity. It gives it a purpose, and it
grounds it.
It grounds it, and it tells a story too. And I think, and let's get to that. Let me preface that.
Second thing,
because the other thing that Natasha is really kind of talented for, like, she designs fashion and all kinds of things. And I think for me, furniture is kind of like this negotiated scale between, like, we have clothes and then there's a room or architecture. And furniture kind of helps us bridge that, so we're not these, like, little animals in, like, this big, space or big building,
It grounds it. Yeah. But then there is a style that we pick on, which will be the furniture as social normative thing. So it tells you what are the expected social norms in particular space. When you see it, you'll immediately say, oh, this is really formal, or this is really informal. So we actually adjust the tone of voice based on our kind of assessment of furniture.
So if you're, like, in a big theater and there's like all these rows of chairs, then you're probably going to be quieter.
Well, so you know the social norm. The social norm is be quiet. When you walk into a 5-star hotel and everything is beige, you're going to walk.
Be boring. Be boring.
Be boring. Well, anyways, but you will adjust your behavior to this.
Yeah.
So in so many ways, we really pick the cues from the furniture, not from walls. And then there's this whole other crazy level of architecture. Architecture is mostly about peripheral vision, meaning you understand the space through here. There's really nothing there, unless there's furniture. Right? So when there's furniture, there's texture, there is color, there's a whole lot of other stuff, plus social cues, plus affordances. Right? So most of us, when we see table and chairs, will not sit on a table, but is it possible to sit on a table? Of course it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's actually quite amazing how inseparable these things are, and how when we create disciplines, we sometimes separate them. Like we separated architecture from planning, really. We separated architecture from engineering, again, why? And now we're separating also architecture and interior.
Or architecture from building, right? But
or for constructing, right?
The other thing I wanted to say, and I think is one of the overarching like themes in the course, is this idea of holistic design, and also using furniture to tell a story. And I think that's just so important. And like even how we're seated now, the story is like, we're obviously not over there with a screen and telling you what is furniture design about. This is creating something different. We're using these slightly playful little chairs. We're in a more informal setting. It's a dialogue. And I think that's also a way you could use furniture when we were putting this earlier today.
And then tables being skewed says, how about we create a circle? And then chairs being turned forward.
By the way, I didn't do this. This is all Ben.
Hey, kudos. I mean, that's what I can say, right?
I think it's just like such a wonderful tool that designers have at their disposal. And it's not just about picking the floor or, drawing lines on a paper, or where the walls go, or where the windows go. I think furniture is an integral part of design. Like if you think about a room, like you should think about what furniture is going there, because the furniture is telling the story of what the program is.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times, like, on projects, we're going to have a little furniture planning exercise later. Nerds. Nerds. But like, what's crazy to me is sometimes we get on these projects and our role is like, to sometimes retroactively, redesign a classroom, or, all these spaces that have already been designed without furniture. They've already been designed without furniture. And there's a lot of issues there because these spaces don't work. Without the furniture, they don't work.
So there's a couple of things. So not only that they don't work with a setup for furniture, but they actually have to work for multiple setups for furniture. So LA School of Thought replaced form and function with spaces and scenarios. And I love that. I mean, that at least, zillion years ago, we switched from form and function, which everybody knows, right? It's
modernist. From form and function
from talking about form and function. Form follows function, however, right, whatever is the relationship between formal aspects of space and functional aspects of space. So every school of thought will come with their own ideas of this is more important or that is more important. So modernism brought this idea of form follows function, meaning we start with the program and then you kind of embody it into something. And then a whole lot of stuff happened. But LA, especially, quite a few people talk about spaces and scenarios. There's actually a book by Hodges and Funk. They really called it spaces and scenarios. Like we own it, we claim it now. So the idea is that life is actually really hard to script. And the modernism of here is how you sit and dine might work on Tuesday, will probably not work on Friday, and then there's zero chance that it works on Sunday. So it needs to, adaptability is an incredibly important part. So space needs to work. If you're, let's call it just an architect, meaning the separation of disciplines happen, and your job is to put walls and windows, you need to kind of accommodate at least 3 different schemes of furniture, and they should work.
Right, right.
And when they should work,
and I guess that's the beauty of like designing with furniture is, say you're given any space, over time you can change it with furniture.
Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, most likely you will, because this is how we domesticate stuff, right? We move tables and we say, so suddenly we claim this space that honestly by the walls and hardware was claimed the other way. But we claimed this for what you and I are doing right now, and we claim it with these 2 tables. We're setting the scene. So the placeness, which is again a really, so this is after modernism, the idea of placeness is this boundary that creates, there is this vibrato in space because we have a table. Otherwise, the placeness of this will be kind of seeping into the hardware that is now putting this whole proscenium, right, and saying, this is a room. We claim this space, and now it's owned.
Yeah.
So, and that happens with furniture. And that is absolutely phenomenal because A, it's domesticating it, and the other one is you turn it around on Friday. Suddenly there's like, oh, instead of me sitting in front of TV having my dinner, there's like, oh, there's 3 people for dinner. Ha! Let's see what we can do here, right? And then there's, there's Sunday family something, and then you do the procession ritual ever so slightly different, and, or in the morning you say, oh, I need my tiny nook for coffee. That will require perfect kind of some sort of setup of furniture that you might even turn around your armchair to now.
I feel like our chairs are turning as
they are turning, and look at us, and we are adjusting.
We're adjusting.
We are adjusting the whole time. Like, okay, we're pushing, adjust. Yep.
Let's switch gears a little bit. So, you've done a lot of work in hospitality, and hospitality is, I think, a space where all of these different, needs for comfort and luxury and functionality, like the way like a hotel room is, for example, designed, like everything is optimized. What has been your experience like with that and furniture?
So you have to operate it on several levels. It needs to be cleaned in less than 20 minutes. And there's a setup that needs to make it uniform, right? So things need to be accessible. Furniture needs to be placed so that cleaning function can happen in as little time as possible. So if it goes from 20 to 11.
So it's like a very pragmatic, even though we don't perceive it that way.
In a sort of way that hospitals are. So hospitals, you would count the number of steps for a nurse, right? So in hospitality, when you are doing it well, you really want to know how fast it can be cleaned. But then you need to communicate luxury, and you need to communicate, I guess, comfort, right? Because these are nomadic spaces. You come in, you engage, and you go out. And you need to feel at home, hopefully immediately. So,
what about like budgets? Like sometimes like we, we think of budgets in terms of like, can we afford it now? What has your experience been like since, these spaces have such a big turnaround? What is like the longevity or the value? How do they see that?
So budget is budget. And there's only so much money in the pot, and there's no, hoping that something will happen and more money will show up usually does not work. So budget is budget. That's how much money you have. You can go under, don't go over.
But I guess my question was like, is it like, I know you have to, in these types of projects, you have to like really stay within the budget. But is there this like, there's a philosophy, we just spend this much money and buy some cheap furniture, or if we buy higher quality furniture, then the value, like it lasts longer.
So when I started a career in hospitality, you would do soft remodel every 4 years and hard remodel every 8, which means every 4 years you scrape everything, you throw it away, and you repaint the walls, you put new wallpapers, all new. Imagine the waste. Right. And then every 8 years, you move walls of the bathroom and everything else.
Well, it's not just the waste in terms of like a financial kind of hit. It's also like, you know,
where does it go? It goes into a landfill.
Yeah.
So, and then, so then the question was, yeah, but we need to stay hip so that our guests would want us. Now, you can be hip in many different ways. And good news is we're no longer doing it.
Can I just quote myself for a moment?
Go, please.
So in the course, one of the lines that Ahnav made, like he made like these graphics. There's graphics in there, motion graphics. One of the things I heard myself say is, I was so impressed. You know, trends come and go, but timeless design remains. And I think there's like this thing about timeless design where it is also sustainable because it's relevant over a period of time, and it's not something you know scrape because it's no longer trendy. You know, like I mean I can give you a lot of examples of that, but
I mean we have so many ways to play with stuff that like lighting, right? Lighting gives you emotional read of a whole lot of stuff. The way lighting operates is it colors the scene for you. And I don't mean just in kind of, you can do it in color. Right?
In actual color.
In actual color. But it actually tells you quite a lot more about the emotional rate of the scene, even with the same kind of normative things, same furniture, same beige, same everything, but the lighting will change it. So we're not limited in the types of things that we can use, and they don't necessarily have to mean you scrape everything, right? You can just change an armchair and have a completely different pop in your hospitality projects. Would that be the trend? Would that be a useful trend? Yes.
Well, I mean, look at the like Eames lounge chair. They actually recently had a wonderful event here where it was like a vintage showcase. And these chairs are still really, you know, relevant. So if you bought it 50 years ago, you know, you're still using it. Let's move on to, you know, you also have this incredible sort of role, I guess, in technology, and you have a startup in like some really something I don't understand what it is, but what do you think is the role of technology in like the way we design these furniture? I mean, I can tell you my experiences like from using the, you know, resources Herman Miller has, but like I think especially now with like AI, like can you tell us a little bit about your
look,
point of view?
My interest is in like purely AI. Okay, that is like everybody else's these days, but I've been on it since 2017, so I have a little bit of like. What this is going to do for a whole lot of processes, dear God, I mean, the level of change in the next 5 to 10 years is, everybody's saying like printing press shift or mobile phone shift. I mean, it's going to redefine a whole lot of things. Now, the other part is fabrication. And I think we have already seen a lot of changes in fabrication. From, remember in the old days, you have to have, you know, scale to be able to produce something for the price. Well, now, because all of our tools are digital, you can have much smaller scales. You can make 5 of something relatively quickly. And that's a pretty profound change. So are we there so that every chair could be different? Probably not. We don't, you know, Can we be there? I think with
But even like
generative
thinking
stuff.
about it, like what you just said, like if every chair was different, I think that's like such like a paradigm shift. You know,
It is.
why do all the chairs need to be the same?
They don't have.
Why can't they all be completely different?
Yep.
You know.
So the idea is then where is the design, and then you start talking about
who's
families.
gonna come up with what they look like?
So, yeah, exactly. So you start coming up with families. So you want them to be related because you want them to tell a story that they belong to the same place, same space, same family, but you can play around.
What do you think? You know, now that we're kind of delegating some of these thought processes to like AI. What do you think is the role? Because I made another course, by the way, on AI.
On AI, I know. Yeah.
So it's related. What is the role of the designer, like the person making these decisions? You know.
Well, that is going to be interesting, and we are not going to be displaced, removed, or anything.
I agree.
There's no way.
Yeah.
So here's my story on that is candles. When candles were the only means of lighting something, then you had a huge production and candles were in demand and there's no other way. You would light zillion candles to have dinner. We don't have to do it anymore, but candles have not disappeared. Right? So how we use candles now is in many ways for mood.
Yeah.
Right? We switch to that type of thing. In a similar way, you know, the couture sewing did not disappear. Yeah, there's 3 people that can afford it. But if you have some skill, you can still make stuff that doesn't have to be mass produced. So in a similar way, AI will be able to do how I want to see that you will be able to partner.
Absolutely. I love that word.
With the designer, but also give you some of the other cues. That's what I'm hoping for. Give you some of the other cues on your client. Well, that's a whole other iffy area. Technology industry has a huge focus on the user. So just to quote one company, I'm not going to name it, they say we have fanatical obsession with the user. Okay. And then architecture and design, not so much.
Which is ironic, I think, because I think that architects think of themselves as people who care about people.
Well,
people.
Yes, and also architecture wants to be a discipline that has its own rules. So if you are an Eisenman disciple, which most of the West Coast teachers are, you're saying architecture just redefines the precedent. There's no people, there's no budget, there's no users, there's no right? So
interesting.
So the kind of dichotomy between...
I'm kind of like, my personal preference is kind of away from that, and I think you sent me, speaking of Eisenman, a while ago, Natasha sent me this interview with Peter Eisenman, and then I commented on that interview in one of my solo rants on my podcast, and I kind of body shamed him a little bit.
So that is not okay. Everything else.
School is just so, and I mean, no disrespect, you know, that whole school where, you know, the architect is this like genius, like kind of hidden away, making his coming up with these like genius ideas that somehow change the world. I feel like that's so anachronistic too. And very egotistical, by the way. Yeah. Because in my view, I think architecture is about people and interacting with people and listening to people and other people's ideas and collaborating. And then, you know, we get to kind of be together and like do all these things, you know. I mean, so it is user.
You will see different people. You will see Tom Main, they will say architecture is a social act. So that's a whole other dimension of it.
But back to furniture. I think furniture is this like vehicle, mediator, tool, medium, you know, where architects essentially create, you know, these spaces for people with furniture.
I mean, if this is the medium how you domesticate space, then
Yeah.
everything is clear, right? It becomes habitable because there's furniture. Can we sleep on a floor? Kinda.
Not really.
Not me. Yeah.
So we're gonna wrap up. So the way we wanted to do this workshop is to have this little bit of dialogue to kind of get some ideas flowing about designing
Put you in the
furniture,
mood.
put you in the mood. And then the second part.
There's one more piece. Because you're going to be looking into libraries, what happened now is we start looking into different learning styles. And that is the greatest example of putting furniture in multiple configurations so that you're accommodating for multiple learning styles.
Absolutely. So the second part of this exercise, and I'll ask you about libraries, which we can touch on briefly, is going to be a planning, a furniture planning exercise for an actual project that I'm working on for a lower school library for a private school here in LA. And, you know, initially I thought like, oh, I'll just make this whole booklet with all these little pieces that you could put together. But no, we are in this beautiful space, you know, so you can walk around and see how you can imagine a library with all these different pieces. You can touch them, you can try them, you can sit in them. And then my final question for you, Natasha, and we really need to wrap up, I'm warning you, is, you know, you have also been an educator. And, you know, a library is like such a cool space, I think. And I think a library is also a space where you can, how you just said, you know, experiment with different types of furniture, different heights, different scenarios. Tell me, what is your kind of perspective on libraries?
So really accommodating for different learning styles and also paying tribute to knowledge, which is kind of
cool.
Sexy, right? I think it is. I mean, paying tribute to knowledge.
Yeah.
We used to collect knowledge in libraries. And in most cases, even I'm trying for the last 15 years not to buy books. Now
I
just
love
reminded.
Buying books. I love books. I'm obsessed with like passion.
Okay. So there were points in my life where it really did not work out for me. Like, oops, at some point I need to draw the line.
Yeah.
I'm still facing that kind of thing.
Dilemma.
Like, I have too many books again. And my absolute conscious focus is to move to digital and stuff, and I'm not. So paying tribute to knowledge is kind of an additional, showing kids a ritual that knowledge is accessible, library, and that their space is dedicated to knowledge. That's kind of sexy.
I love it. I love that. So let's end on that. We're going to end the filmed part of this workshop and move on to the planning exercise. And then I invite you to also maybe collaborate, meet, you know, some friends. And, you know, we can walk around and look at some cool furniture and this beautiful, beautiful space. And that's it for now.
Yay.
All right. Thank you.